Hello, welcome to VR Roundtable, episode 52. My name is Gary, and I'm joined by Chris, Anthony, and Steve. And we've been going. This is episode 52, so we've been going for approximately a year now. So stay tuned till the end of the show because we've got some giveaways to announce that will be taking place sort of on iTunes, and also we might have something for people on Reddit and YouTube as well. So check the end of the show for that. But anyway, let's go over to Anthony first this week. How are you?
I'm doing good. Everything's going great. I mean, obviously, with what's going on in Florida, you know, my heart goes out to everybody there. Hopefully people are getting out of there safely. The NFL starts tomorrow. I'm excited. I kind of just spoiled it. We're doing this on Saturday, and it's the first weekend of the NFL. And I love VR, but I'm a football junkie as well. So it's an exciting time for me right now. So
the season got off to the best start imaginable with the Patriots taking an L. Come on,
I love that.
Okay, good. Most of the world loves that, or most of the country at least.
Dude, I'm so sick of Tom Brady, and I'm in fantasy football as well. And I was playing a guy that had Tom Brady, and so I was so happy to see him have such a terrible game. Just because Tom Brady, man. I mean, he's like Captain America. It's like he's had enough fun for his life. Let somebody else enjoy something.
I just hope this doesn't motivate them to go 15-0 the rest of the season.
God. I don't know what these guys are talking about. Anyway, Steve, how are you this week? I think you're feeling a bit under the weather, aren't you?
I'm doing okay. I'm feeling better, but I've been sick earlier this week, coming back from the little trip my wife and I took last week. So feeling better. But driving home, I went to Chicago, and driving home, I listened to the show that you guys did last week, and I have to say that I thought one of you three were going to chime in and give me my honorary vote for Game of the Year, because all three of you know what I would have said, but none of you said, hey, I'm going to vote in Steve's proxy for Resident Evil 7. No one did it. So there it is. I'm putting it out there. My Game of the Year thus far in 2017 for VR. No surprise for anyone that's listened to the show more than once. It's Resident Evil 7.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I thought maybe Lone Echo will be up there for you as well.
Lone Echo is a very close second. I think it's the better, like, technical VR experience, but in terms of overall game and feeling, I still preferred Resident Evil 7.
Yeah.
You know what's unusual about that is usually when you get into award seasons and stuff, there's a major like recency bias, and we tend to think of things that are more fresh in our mind. And Resident Evil 7, that was like late January. So that's truly impressive that it's holding up for you. So
yeah,
we'll have to see if it survives.
It's recent in our minds because Steve brings it up every show. So
sorry.
It's a great game.
Well,
I was just going to say, because if presumably this game's going to be coming out on the Vive or the Rift at some point as well. I can't wait to pick this game up because everybody does talk about it.
Well, you're probably not going to like it as much then, because I've been building the hype for you, so there's no way it's going to live up to what you think it may be based on my.
The only thing I'll say is at least Steve doesn't talk about Lucky's Tale anymore. Remember that? I mean, this being the 52-week episode or whatever. Early on, he was always mentioning Lucky's Tale.
It's a good game. Chris, how are you this week?
I'm good. I'm back in Maine just because my electric skateboard I've been waiting like 10 months for shipped here instead of to my apartment, which was annoying because I changed the address like a month ago. But, excited to finally have that. And yeah.
Well, are you doing a video for it then on your channel too?
Yeah. It's going to go, I think it goes a top speed of like 33 miles an hour. It's pretty insane. So it'll be fun to test.
That's dangerous. You can't get on that thing.
Yeah, it's pretty scary, but.
Wow. Okay. Anyway, let's get on to the show because we've got a few news stories that we want to talk about this week. We've also got, what else have we got? So yeah, we've got some big news stories, some smaller ones, and then we've got a fair few games that we want to get into. A few of these are a little bit older games, but we can mention them anyway and talk briefly about our opinions, because although, VR has been around for a while now and games have been, obviously around for that length of time. It all depends on when you jump on certain games, and there are certain games in these lists that are a little bit older, but we're just getting to now. So we'll give some opinions on there. But the first news story that I've got down here is Rockstar. Now, they announced LA Noire for VR, which is sort of a standalone, a separate thing. It's not the full game that they're going to be bringing out this November. It will be sort of a separate title, which includes some of the cases for VR that have been specially designed for VR, or converted, I should say. So this is called LA Noire, the VR case files, and it's coming out for the HTC Vive, and this is coinciding with a PlayStation release of like a sort of a remaster of LA Noire as well. But this is all interesting stuff. I'll get onto my thoughts in a moment, but Steve, why don't I go over to you first? What do you think of this?
I don't have too much to say other than I think it's good news because it's indicative that Rockstar is no longer ignoring, and Take-Two are no longer ignoring the VR segment. This is presumably their Trojan horse into getting some developer experience, getting some work under their belt, so that hopefully, as they are inevitably making the next Grand Theft Auto and all that, it may also include some VR content. So I played LA Noire. I didn't complete it. I put maybe an hour or two into it back, and I think the game came out in 2011. So there's a lot of commentary that it makes sense for them to use it as their VR sort of entryway, because it's a little bit slower pace. It's not as fast as a Grand Theft Auto in general, and that some of the detective type elements would translate a little bit better to some of the VR mechanisms. So I think it's good news, and I'm excited to see Rockstar get into the fold.
Yeah. Anthony, how about you? Have you played LA Noire before?
No, this is going to be similar to me, like Half-Life 2 VR mod. Well, Half-Life 2 VR mod, I played about halfway through that and never finished it. And so I'm tremendously excited because it's like, hey, this is kind of almost a new game because I haven't finished it. LA Noire is even better for me because when this game came out, I just didn't get around to it for whatever. I was playing other things. I was interested in it. I saw it and was excited about it. The cool thing about this is if we go back to the development of LA Noire, I believe the game was primarily developed in Australia. Rockstar had a team in Australia at the time, and they used a lot of specialized technology to make this game. They took actors and filmed them in these special camera setups where there was like 150 cameras hitting them in all possible angles. And so they did a lot of work that kind of stuff could really translate to VR quite well. And the other thing I always think about is I remember playing Batman Arkham VR. Like when I first played Batman Arkham VR on the PlayStation VR, there's this one scene where it's a fight between these two guys, and you're standing right there and you're watching this fight happen, and you can rewind time and you can fast forward time and you can kind of walk around it, and you're kind of like observing the scene. And I remember when I was playing that, I was like, man, VR would be absolutely perfect for detective games, because the thing about VR is you kind of want to take your time in VR. You don't want to rush through stuff. You kind of want to enjoy just being in a physical space and kind of looking around and stuff like that. And a detective game, I mean, that's just perfect. Those of you that have played Quinero, which is kind of a sampler of an idea that, I don't know if it was like the University of Toronto or something, but some school created Quinero as a project. And that's very similar as well, where you're seeing something happen, you rewind it, you fast forward, you kind of looking for clues and stuff. So I think the idea of taking LA Noire and bringing it to VR is exciting. And when we heard about the 7 case files rather than the full game, a lot of people were disappointed with that. Me, I'm actually more excited after hearing that, because what I think is possible is they handpicked, very specific cases that they think work better for VR. And if they were just going to do like an Alien Isolation mod or like a Doom 3 BFG type mod, where they're basically just converting the entire game for VR in like one fell swoop, and then the whole thing would work. Sometimes that's a little bit less elegant, where if they take individual pieces and they try to craft it, I'm assuming that this is legit and that they're really putting time towards this. And to Steve's remarks, we all know about Strauss Zelnick. He's made it perfectly clear, the CEO of Take-Two Interactive. He said it a million times that he's not really a big VR guy, but Take-Two Interactive, as a major publisher, one of the biggest in the industry, they would be ludicrous not to dip their toes in all of these different waters. All these companies have to do this as a defensive play, if nothing else. And us as VR consumers, I think if this game is halfway decent, we should buy it, because it sends a message to these major publishers that, you know what, VR is not going away. We need to start dedicating resources to this. And if anybody wants Grand Theft Auto in VR, you got to buy this. And I kind of hate telling people to buy stuff like that. Like, really, they should please us. But VR is new, beggars not choosers, and we got to vote with our wallets.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard that Take-Two, because when VR was first released, you know, everybody was after these sort of Grand Theft Auto type games, and everybody's mentioned before that Take-Two was never really interested. In fact, quite the opposite in terms of VR, some of the comments that they've made. So it's interesting that now Rockstar are doing something like this. And you know, I've not played LA Noire before, but I've heard from various people that this is the type of game that's perfectly suited for virtual reality. So I'm really looking forward to playing this. And I think you're right. You know, if we want to send a message, I think it's more the potential that what this means for the future of VR. The fact that Rockstar are just dipping their toes into this to test the waters speaks volumes. When we've heard this before about how Take-Two are not interested, the fact that Rockstar are taking this step is more interesting to me than the actual game. I don't know a lot about the game. I'm interested to try it, but I think the fact that a developer as huge as Rockstar, the biggest developer in the world, really, for them to be making this move is fantastic. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Chris, I haven't played LA Noire before. Have you ever tried this game?
No, I haven't, but I've played a similar like detective style game at my college. We have these QA labs where we can go in and test what like the seniors and juniors are doing. And they had this Vive game they were working on that was kind of similar. And like, it's just so cool because you have the notes and you can like remember where the notes are. And like, it makes perfect sense. I'm just kind of wondering how free-handed note-taking is going to be on the Vive wands. That'll be kind of interesting to try to write out whatever you want to remember or whatever. But yeah, I mean, based on the article, it sounds like it's exactly like hand-picked stuff that would work really well, like first-person driving, the note-taking, and shootouts. Like that's all stuff that we know works well in VR, and it'll be cool. Like I feel like there's never been a driving experience where like I can use like a Vive wand or touch control to control the wheel. So I hope that's what this is, because like I would buy it just for that alone. Like I haven't seen an experience like that.
It'd be interesting to see how they're planning on making this transition. If you're in a standing environment and then all of a sudden, you know, in the next scene, you're sitting down in a car, how they make that transition. Did they say, you know, find a seat and we'll sort of reset the view and then you go ahead? I don't know how the game works or how they might combat that.
Yeah. I've always wanted, like, this is one of my like dream games, is I've always wanted like a room scale game where I have this seated area and like it's like walk to your car or whatever, and like I have my car exactly where it should be, and then when I step in the seat it's a wheel, and I want this to happen. I don't think this will happen in this game, but like it's a good idea, man.
Just on that point as well, just quickly before we move on to the next news story, you know, everybody knows who watches this show knows that I'm you know, I like No Man's Sky. I'm a bit of a fan of that game, and I think it'd be great in VR. But that also has a similar problem. You know, you've got that where you're walking around on the planet will be great for room scale with motion controllers, but then the part where you fly in the ship and you're traveling between planets would really need to be a seated experience. You
know, the accessory that we need is the VR chair, you know, a tracked chair. And I mean, people are going to need a room scale space to do this, but imagine if you had a nice room scale space, and you put your tracked chair in, say, the far left corner, right? And you have it aimed in this direction. So it's kind of like the driver's side of the car. For Gary, of course, it'd be opposite in Europe. But what you could do is you always have that chair there. And then so for when you do that, you would actually see a car in the right position. The chair would be in that right spot. And so you go over, you open that virtual door, and then you sit on that chair.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, anyway, we can get on to the next news story. This was one that stuck out to me because I think this is really important, actually. This is ManoMotion, which are a company that are providing a solution for hand gesture controls in ARKit. Now, what this is, it's an additional SDK as part of ARKit, which will integrate hand gestures in order for developers to use this kind of stuff and employ it in their own applications. There was a video on this which looked quite interesting. Now, the video was really somebody holding a phone in front of them, and then they had their hands out and they were just basically playing beer pong, where they were throwing a ping pong ball into some cups on the other side of a table. But this was all done in augmented reality, and it's interesting to me. I think this is sort of indicative of the next stage of AR. We're still very early on in AR at the moment. We've got ARKit and AR Core coming out, but this is still very early on, and it's interesting that companies are working on this kind of stuff, because I think gesture control is what's needed to take it to the next stage. If we ever get to the point where we're wearing these glasses, AR glasses that are possibly connected, tethered to our phones or whatever, at that point, I think we do need these gesture controls. You don't want to be carrying around motion controllers with you or anything like that. And this seemed to work pretty well. It's got 27 degrees of freedom. So presumably that means it's got sort of 20 plus specific gestures it can recognize. And, you know, it can recognize things like swipes, clicking, tapping, grabbing and releasing. And they've also mentioned, ManoMotion have also mentioned that they'll be bringing this technology over to AR Core as well as ARKit. Chris, did you see this video at all of this ManoMotion?
Yeah, it looks pretty promising. It's kind of similar to how the HoloLens was at first, when they had like, what they call it, like the
pinch type. Yeah, I don't know exactly what they called it.
The click or whatever they want to call it. Yeah, I feel like that's the easiest kind of gesture to detect, because you can see the fingers coming together. But I've used the Leap Motion a lot back in the DevKit 2 days, and like once you can see your hands, or once your hands are tracked accurately and you can make gestures, it's going to be a really big game changer. So it's good to see progress in this, especially when there's like a depth sensing camera in phones or something, if that ever happens. Because right now I doubt it knows how far the hand is from the table. It's just kind of a guess. But yeah, in the future, I could imagine like if there's any depth information, you could actually do some pretty accurate like tracked games with this type of mechanic. So
that's a good point. Now at least I have an iPhone 7 Plus, and it has the dual cameras and everything that we've seen on the iPhone 8, which will presumably come right around the same time as ARKit when the latest iOS comes out of beta. It has the dual lenses, and there are different focal lengths on those cameras, and they could triangulate depth from that. The way it's used now, it can do sort of a photographer's bokeh effect to give it that kind of blurred background and in focus foreground. But to your point, Chris, I think higher end smartphones that have multiple lens cameras will be able to do that. Should they invest in the software and actually make it work, I think they'll have the physical capabilities already in the phones to go with it.
Yeah, I think it's we should probably mention as well that next week Apple will be sort of revealing the next iPhone, and it's going to be sort of that they're going to presumably, well, I don't know, presumably, but apparently, if rumors are to be believed, that they're going to have various models with a very high end model, sort of $1,000 plus, which possibly will have some advanced technology in order to help things like ARKit and sort of elevate it beyond what a standard mobile phone can do. But we don't know. We're going to see all that news next week. But I just wanted to mention that because my contract's up, so who knows? We'll see what happens with that. Anthony, did you have anything you wanted to mention on that ManoMotion? I don't know if you saw the video at all.
Yeah, I saw the video real quick. I agree with what Chris is saying, because you can't, I mean, you're not going to be bringing controllers around with you. So they do have to have a solution for that. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I haven't tried like a leap motion or anything where you're just using your fingers and there's no tactile, there's no extra like feedback coming. And I'm just wondering, like, I wonder if they could just have like a little thing that just goes on your finger and your thumb, and it maybe just gives you a tiny little bit of, you know, just a little, like you're touching, like there's 5 little boxes, you know what I mean? And you touch the boxes and you feel just a little, and maybe you can just put a little tiny little thing on your 2 digits to kind of give you a little bit, but then, you know, you're sticking something in your pocket. So I don't know if that would work either. But all of this is exciting that we're continuing to move forward, and I'm looking forward to these to the new iPhone announcement as well, because I'm looking forward to this getting kickstarted a little bit more.
Yeah, you know what's so weird is when I had the Leap Motion, like when you see your hands completely tracked accurately, like it didn't happen very often because the Leap Motion isn't the best at tracking, but you've kind of felt like your hands were going through objects and you felt like air. It was so weird. It was like this sensation of like feeling the object. Like it felt like someone was blowing on your hand, even though you were just touching the object, like just from visuals alone. It was the creepiest thing. I don't know if other people experienced that, but like, it's so weird. Like it felt like exactly what you were saying, Anthony. Like it feels like there's some feedback when your hands on something. It's weird. I don't know.
Yeah, I've tried Leap Motion too, and it actually worked a little bit better than I expected it to, but within sort of very limited parameters. You know, you've got to have your hands right in front of you in order for it to track them properly, and I thought it worked pretty well. But yeah, the feedback, you know, we're going from things like even touch screens, you know, going from a standard controller based gaming to touchscreen gaming. A lot of people don't like that transition, and I don't really like these touch screens. There's no feedback in that I think you do need. But Chris, you know, as you say, by having they can do clever things with just visuals and sound in order to make you sort of make that leap beyond having actual feelings, haptics within your fingers. They can probably do a lot to combat all of that stuff anyway, so you don't need specific things, although obviously that will help in the long run. Okay, the next news story that we've got down here is the Pimax 8K HMD. Now, this is SteamVR compatible. This was actually announced a while ago. We all saw pictures of this HMD, which is it looks a little bit mad. You know, when it's on your face. Pictures of this, it extends beyond the usual sort of HMDs that we're seeing, like the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift. It's a very, very large HMD, but the reason it's done that is because it's using separate screens, very, very big screens, which give a wider field of view. But the interesting thing about this news story that I thought was in this video, this latest video for this headset that's been released, is the amount of accessories that this company is producing for this HMD. Now, in this short video, it's only about a minute or a minute and a half long. They go through some of the accessories that they're going to be sort of releasing. I don't know whether they'll be released alongside or at a future date. But I'll just go over these and then I'll go over to you guys for your opinions on this. But in this video, they're also going to be releasing an eye tracking module, which is, these are all add-ons. These are not things you get with the HMD. These are things that you can buy at a later date. So you've got an eye tracking module. You've also got an inside-out hand tracking module, which clips onto the bottom of the HMD. It looks a little bit like a Leap Motion kind of add-on. You've also got a scent enabling module, which you can remove these previous modules and attach this on, so you get scent in VR as well. You've also got this wireless transmission module, customized VR frame, which are for people with prescription glasses, presumably, a cooling fan, and then separate headbands. You've got a headband and a head strap as well, which are all separate items. But I just thought it was interesting. You know, a lot of people are talking about this 8K HMD and all these accessories as well. When I look at this, when I see this video, how well is all this stuff going to work? It feels like this company is doing too much. But Steve, I'll go over to you first on this one. I don't know your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I think the company probably is doing too much. I think from a technical standpoint, I didn't pay too much attention to it. I think the headset itself was announced back at the beginning of the year at CES, perhaps. And I didn't pay too much attention to it. And I guess I missed that it was a Steam VR capable system. And what I learned with all the recent news being kicked up on it is that it actually comes with lighthouses, and then their motion controllers look like a hybrid between the Vive ones and the Oculus Touch, and the controller design actually looks pretty nice, and to me it looks better than the Microsoft controller. So all that is pretty interesting in and of itself. But the accessories are also, you know, they're not really saying whether or not these accessories will be available at launch or how much later. Is it going to be something that's a year later? Who knows? But all in all, I think it's an interesting product, and I'm very curious to see what it's going to go for retail wise. Now, it's not truly 8K. It's sort of a misnomer. It's part of their marketing and their branding. It's a 4K screen per eye, which is different than perceiving something at 8K resolution, but it's still like way above any of the headsets that are out there today. So it's very curious. Now on the downside, I believe it's only got a 60 hertz refresh rate. So there will be no 90 or 120 frame content on it. And it's possibly also LCD and not OLED or other types of display technology, which may cause some of that ghosting effect. LCD in general just isn't as good, but nevertheless, and it's interesting, but there's going to be a Kickstarter as well, which is something I didn't know until recently. I'm not going to go for a Kickstarter. I think Chris has a horror story, you know, the Kickstarters themselves. That's just too risky. But if it ever comes out and something that I can buy in a store, especially if the LG unit hasn't surfaced and the Microsoft units aren't all that of an improvement resolution wise, I would be hard tempted to not like at least buy one and try it for a couple of weeks and return it or something.
Yeah, this is Pimax. They did release a 4K HMD as well a while ago now, and I've seen some impressions of that, and that also had this 60 hertz refresh rate. But a lot of people were saying, you know, that one really wasn't that bad overall. Some of the videos that I saw of reviews of that, they said it worked pretty well. Anthony, does an 8K HMD interest you?
Hell yeah. But you know, I'm actually a little bit more curious about the 200-degree field of view. And so when you look at this headset, it looks very similar to the Star VR, you know, the Starbreeze one, right? And so you basically have the screens horizontal like that. And so it's kind of sticking out and wrapping around. Now, obviously, the big downside is if you think VR looks dorky now, wait till you get this thing on your head. But the idea of seeing 200-degree field of view, see, I don't know, man. It's like, I really like this idea of pushing immersion and like, let's get us into this world more, and seeing more of the world is tremendously exciting. On my own Vive, I'm using this like super thin foam gasket so that I can just get my eyeballs as close as humanly possible to the screens. And I see so much more of the world. And it's what, you know, if I use someone else's Vive or I go back to the original stock gasket, it's like, oh my God, this is such a downgrade, because I was getting like an extra 10%. So imagine like another 90% added to your field of view and practically almost all your periphery. I'm wondering how they're doing this though, because I remember Panasonic, I think it might have been at the last Consumer Electronics show, Panasonic showed off a prototype headset that they had where it had your normal screens, but it had another two screens that were in there, another lens that was like tilted a bit, and it was basically for your periphery. I wonder if they're doing a similar thing to that. And then the big question I have too is, like Steve mentioned this, if you look at the pictures for this, it shows what appears to be two Lighthouse like cubes, right? Is this officially licensed by Valve? Like, is this, are they is that actual Lighthouse technology, or is this company building something that is similar to a Lighthouse and it's going to work like a Lighthouse, and this will work with SteamVR just like your Oculus Rift will work with SteamVR? Or are they really licensing technology from Valve? That's a huge question for me, because if they're really licensing technology from Valve and this really has lighthouses, my interest level jumps dramatically. Where if this is just them creating their own faux lighthouse, so to speak, I'm like, I don't know, now. But I mean, you have to go back to the size of the thing and how huge it is and the weight and like moving around. I mean, try to play Space Pirate Trainer. You're moving around like this and you got this big giant thing. Is it going to stay firm? How much does it weigh? I would love to try one of these things in person. I'd love to try the Star VR thing in person. I wish there was some place I could go to try some of this stuff.
Yeah. In that video, actually, they put it on some scales with a HTC Vive, and they, it's lighter than a Vive. So that's pretty interesting as well. Chris, did you see this video?
I didn't see the video, but I've been looking at the article, and in the article it says that they've integrated Lighthouse like from Valve, so that's good for Anthony, I guess. But I just don't agree with all this little accessories stuff. Like, we're going to have 1 million accessories, and if you want to smell stuff, you have to buy an accessory. I just think that's like the wrong business move to go for. Maybe they're trying to be like a high-end VR headset where you buy the wireless add-on, you buy all this stuff later, I guess. But I just don't agree with that business model, like, per se. But it does seem cool. I really wish it wasn't LCD. I'd be way more excited if it was OLED, just because I've had LCD, the dev kit one was terrible with ghosting, and I'm sure this might be fine. But yeah, and then also I think they use Fresnel lenses, like they've got to. And I've heard, I think Palmer Luckey talk about like the Star VR a while ago, and he said like it just causes major warping depending on how it is on your head. But I need to try it, like if it's actually good, this would be a game changer, I feel like.
Hey, quick question out there. So this 200-degree field of view, like let's say you did get this headset and you have this 200-degree field of view, will games automatically take advantage of that, or do they have to like have a special mode that you'll have to access?
Well, from everything that I've read so far, because a few people have brought that up and they've said that it should just work, but it can be dependent on certain things. But they said that generally speaking, I think it was the developer, I can't remember, it might be Climby, the developer of Climby, was answering this question. They said, really, it should just work, but there are some factors that you need to take into account with that as well.
I think... yeah, I agree with you. I remember reading something to that effect as well, Gary. Like the expectation that the field of view is just your window into a 360-degree world with left and right eye depth, and it should work for the most part. I think if you have any menu options or any HUD, it may present an issue in your game. You may have to revisit that, but just viewing into the space, it should translate relatively easy. I may have been wrong on the LCD. I think I picked that up from somewhere else. Maybe it was a carryover from the Pimax 4K. The actual stated specifications are that it has a 75/90 hertz per eye refresh rate. I don't know how you have / like you're either a frequency or a not with your display. So I'm not sure what that means. But then it also can support 150 to 180 hertz with brain warp. I'm guessing brain warp is their take on time warp from Oculus. So maybe it's a little bit better than what I initially stated.
It does say LCD in the article, so I don't know, maybe the article, I guess it could just be a high refresh LCD. But what is weird to me is they're including lighthouses, but they also have their optically tracked thing. Like if you look on the website, it still has like a Oculus sensor type camera, but then they also have lighthouses. I'm just wondering what the point of that is. It's really strange.
There'll be more details released at some point, I'm sure. Yeah, because like you say, there is a Kickstarter for this as well. I think that goes live towards the end of September, towards the end of this month. So you can check that out.
Chris, are you going to get on that Kickstarter? We know you're a fan of them.
Oh man, it was annoying because like I was all done with Kickstarters. Well, after the STEM system, but like before the STEM system, I almost went on the Oculus Kickstarter. I wish I did, because you could have got a free Rift, but who would have known, right? But yeah,
Right.
man, the STEM system, man. One of these weeks, I bet I'll get it.
They have no legal obligation. Like if they go under, it's not like they've stolen from you. You're taking that risk as a backer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my skateboard, I'm glad it got delivered, but like I trusted the company before, and it wasn't a Kickstarter, it was like a pre-order on their website, so I had a little more of a legal say in it or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just on SteamVR actually, Anthony, I'll go over to you on this one. I think you put something down here where, because we heard about this a while ago, but SteamVR won't be immediately available for these new Windows mixed reality headsets. Why don't you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, so this is kind of old, but we didn't cover this in our last show, so I just thought we should probably mention this. If you're planning on picking up one of the mixed reality headsets, is it October 17th that these are coming out?
Oh, yeah.
Somewhere around there. Okay, so if you're planning on grabbing one of these in mid-October, be aware of the fact that the day that you bring it home, you might not be jumping into SteamVR. So this is according to, let me get it here, Greg Sullivan. Okay, so Microsoft's communication director for mixed reality. He announced this at IFA 2017, which I believe that was the show that was in Germany where they were talking about all of this mixed reality stuff. And basically just saying that SteamVR will not be available for the release of the Fall Creators Update on October 17th. That work on integrating the mixed reality headsets in Valve's platform has just begun, and Sullivan provided no concrete answer when asked when customers will actually be able to access the SteamVR library. And it's funny because when this story did hit, there was some speculation from people thinking, I wonder if Microsoft is beyond delaying the SteamVR thing just a little bit so that everybody that grabs one of these things on October 17th has to go to the Microsoft Store, set up an account, start downloading some Microsoft Store stuff, rather than going to the store, buying this headset, coming home, immediately hooking it up to SteamVR, and not using anything Microsoft whatsoever, because you have to kind of assume with the HoloLens technology and the stuff that is being thrown into these things that they might be being sold relatively close to cost, and that the money is more on the back end. And so there's probably a focus for Microsoft where they want to get people using their store. And I don't know if that's the case here, because some people are saying, really, how long would it take them? Like, it should only take them an afternoon to rewrite a little bit of code to get this up and running. So, we'll have to see. Hopefully it's only delayed like a week or so, I'd hope.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. I hadn't thought of that point, that this could be done on purpose in order for them to sort of capitalize on new VR owners just wanting to purchase from their store so that they can sort of get something on there. I mean, we did hear that these mixed reality headsets from Windows, they're going to be launched with quite a lot of titles really on the Windows Store as well. So, you can pick up a fair few of the games that are on Steam, like Arizona Sunshine and things like that, will be on the Windows Store as well. So it makes sense that they should probably delay this for a couple of weeks or a couple of months even. But I don't know if they give a time frame on when it will be getting the SteamVR support. But yeah, it's interesting, that point. Steve, have you got anything to say on this one?
I not as much. I'm not sure it's a conspiracy, because there's no reason. Like if Microsoft was the only headset on the market and they wanted to lock the ecosystem up for a period of time. But if you're on the market for a VR headset, and you don't have to buy a Microsoft one. So it's like I don't see choosing your headset, a Microsoft headset. If you're interested in SteamVR, why would you just get a Rift? It's a little more money, I guess, but it's it doesn't make sense to me that a person would be knowingly and consciously interested in SteamVR and then go and buy a Microsoft headset before the SteamVR is readily available. So I don't see it as necessarily a big conspiracy. Maybe it is a little bit. I guess it wouldn't even be a big conspiracy in and of itself, but I think more or less that they're going to want to, even though someone may be able to peck away at a keyboard and get this resolved in short order, it's got to go through quality processes. Like, they don't want to release something that has the potential of just coming out day one and being really broken. Because you can't recover from something like that, or makes it very difficult to recover from something like that. So I think it's more along that's just what it's taking to get this done. Now, the interesting thing for me is will some hacker, somebody like CrossVR, because I doubt he would do this, given where he's at right now, but with someone with that skill set, get it working, get the Microsoft units working on SteamVR before official support comes? Probably.
Yeah, that's a good point as well, actually. Yeah, I'm sure that will happen. But I mean, I don't think of it as some kind of conspiracy. I just think of it as some kind of business move on Microsoft's part, really, to sort of drag the heels for a couple of weeks or for a month or so. I think they could just sort of justify that from that point of view. And also, you know, I do take your point. Anybody who's been following VR would probably go for a Rift if it was compatible with Windows Mixed Reality and SteamVR. They could go for a Rift or a Vive or something like this. But, you know, I think the inside-out tracking is appealing to a lot of people, and the convenience of that as well. So people could still go for it for that reason. Chris, what do you think of this? Do you think that Microsoft have done this on purpose, or is it just a delay as you'd expect?
I think it's really dumb because, like, yeah, knowing how easily this stuff can be integrated, you just take the SDK, like, this is the position of this, and this, pipe it to SteamVR. I mean, maybe it's not that easy per se, but, like, it should just take an hour, to be honest. Like, there's no way it would take longer than that. So it's got to be a business move or something, but I feel like it might even hurt them just to do this, because people aren't going to buy these headsets day one because they're going to be like, I want to play all my Steam library VR games that I already have or that I bought in anticipation. Because, like, this news came out after they announced SteamVR support, so I bet a bunch of people went and bought SteamVR games, and now they won't be able to play it day one. But yeah, I think someone like CrossVR will just come up with a patch in like an hour or so after these come out. Like, it should be very simple to do. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so the last main news story that I've got down here is Google possibly buying HTC. We heard that a few weeks ago that HTC were possibly selling the Vive part of their company, selling it off. And, you know, we had that tweet from Palmer Luckey saying, should I buy Vive? But now it looks like, because the last couple of days, it looks like the HTC was selling off the mobile phone part of their company. Now it appears that Google could possibly just be purchasing HTC entirely, including everything that they're doing with VR and mobile phones. So it's an interesting story, this one. I haven't read too much about this, but let me just go back to Chris. I don't know if you've got anything extra to mention on this, because I don't know a lot about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not too much like that's hard evidence, but if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because you think Google is starting to do more hardware. You know, they have their Google Home, their Pixel, their Daydream, so that they're starting to kind of get more into the hardware space again. I mean, they did buy Motorola, then sell it like a year later, so that happened in the past. But I feel like they would benefit from having this fast track to get things out into the market. And it does seem like they've been working a lot with HTC, like on their, you know, on their apps that they've made that kind of work with HTC products, VR wise. So yeah, according to this article, it's in the final stages of acquiring all or part of HTC. So I don't know where this comes from, but if this happens, it sounds like it's going to happen fairly soon, and that would just be big news.
Yeah. Anthony, how about you?
Yeah, you know, the ramifications of this, if it really does happen, is hard to imagine, because honestly, I believe that if they are buying the entire company, like 95% of that purchase is for the manufacturing facilities and that type of thing, because Google, you know, then they could they don't have to contract out with another company. They have their own internal development for their phones. They can tie it in. From the VR standpoint, it's interesting because, I mean, they have this Daydream initiative. They have their own plans. They have a massive investment in Magic Leap and some other companies. So it's hard to imagine how it would all combine. Possibly they could look towards the Vive as being like a high-end VR solution. And I mean, hopefully they wouldn't kill it off or anything like that, or maybe they would spin it off or what have you. I was joking when this came out, when this was first announced. I was like, well, at least the positive news is that they can't be any worse at customer service than HTC and like the support and all of that. We always hear the horror stories about that. And so, you know, I was just thinking maybe like if Google did take this over, I would imagine they would probably see all the complaints of like the horror stories of HTC support and stuff like that. And I would guess as an intelligently ran company that they would shut all of that down and create their own support and stuff like that. But some of the other people, I was in this one Reddit thread, and some of the other people were saying, you really don't want Google. They buy things, they abandon it, you know, all this type of stuff. So maybe it's not as great as I originally thought it would be. I thought, well, you can't get any worse than HTC really, right? You know, so I thought anything would be better, but maybe not. I don't know.
Steve, what are your thoughts?
Who knows if it's true or not? That's my thoughts. If I think of HTC selling the entirety of themselves or selling just the smartphone portion in maintaining the Vive brand, Google is a company that would fit that. So it's believable. I don't know if these dots are connected because it's believable, because there is some established relationship there. But I mean, it's a crapshoot, really. If we assume that it's true, I would think that it's a positive move for HTC and people that have HTC products or are a fan of the brand. I think in general, Google does more good than harm in the tech space. It is true they won't float something out there that isn't taking off. They will shut something down pretty quickly, but that doesn't mean that they would do that with anything VR related. If they would shut down some of the smartphone branding, and instead they leverage the infrastructure and the manufacturing capability to build the Pixel and then kill off any HTC branded phone while also maintaining the Vive, that would make perfect sense. So who knows, really? I think it's believable, and that's really our only takeaway right now, is that this could be happening, and I think that's very fair if it does.
Yeah. Okay, a couple of smaller news stories that we've got down here. The first one I wanted to talk about is the Gallery Episode 2. It got a new trailer. So this is the Gallery Episode 2, Heart of the Emberstone. The trailer that was released last week, last couple of days, I believe. I just wanted to talk about this because I love it. I think it's fantastic. The Gallery is a game that I played not too long after I got my Vive, actually. It was one of the first games that was very, very sort of polished and, you know, a high quality title when those kinds of titles were a little bit more few and far between than they are now. So I really enjoyed the Gallery, and this trailer is sort of set in, it's portrayed in a way like it's being played on an old VHS in the 80s, and they've nailed it down. I think I've come to the conclusion that I'm just an absolute sucker for anything that plays on 80s nostalgia, to be honest, because this absolutely drew me in. I've got, you know, VHSs. I've still got them now of movies that I owned in the 80s. They don't get played because I've not got a VHS player, but I've still got them. But I remember there's a movie that I've got called Star Chaser, The Legend of Orion. It's an animated movie, an old 80s movie. But before that, you've got these trailers, as you do on these films. And this Gallery Episode 2 trailer absolutely nails the tone. It's not just the tone, but the voiceover, everything about it is perfect, and it harks back to these 80s films like The Goonies, which some people mentioned the Gallery Episode 1 sort of was reminiscent of in some ways. It's an adventure, and I think this trailer does such a fantastic job of getting you excited for this next episode. I'll pass it over to Anthony. Anthony, what did you think of this?
Man, I didn't see the trailer. I'm so sorry about that. But I am excited for this game. I've heard about it for a long time, and I heard that it was coming in September for a long time. And when this trailer first came out, I mentioned to somebody else, I was like, oh, did they give a final date, you know, maybe at the very end of the trailer? And there's still not a date, but they're still saying September. I'm looking at the screen here. We're in September 9th. So hopefully this will be coming in the next couple weeks. The only other thing I have to say about it is I do remember the developer did receive Knuckles controllers, you know, and they had some gifts and stuff where they were showing them using the Knuckles controllers in Heart of the Emberstone. And months ago, some of us were speculating, could this be a launch game? You know, could Knuckles be coming that fast? I don't think anybody thinks that now, but I'm still very excited for it. And it's supposedly going to be a lot longer than the first game, which was one of the biggest complaints of the first game. The price of the first game has dropped considerably since it was launched. So if you've never picked that up and you're looking forward to this other one, you might want to go ahead and grab the first game, play through it, and get ready for this next one.
Steve, I know you've played the gallery as well. What did you think? Did you see this trailer?
I saw the trailer and I didn't draw as much from it as you did. It's a teaser trailer. It doesn't actually show any like gameplay. It just kind of, you get a quick glimpse at a like this path into this labyrinth or whatever is going on. Maybe it's the inner heart of a giant Emberstone. I don't know. But I'm still excited for the game. I honestly, I never finished the first one. I got into the sewer and then got distracted, did some other things, never went back to it. And I've been holding off on it for part 2 or episode 2 to be dated. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to probably just begin episode 1 from the beginning and kind of play through it and have it all fresh. So I want to get back to it. I'm going to play it. I have it in my library. I just need to wait for the second one to be dated because I want a more continuous experience. There's no point in playing it now, in my opinion. So that's where I stand. I really look forward to the game. And I'll go ahead and this kind of segues into the next little small point that you're going to make, Gary, is that does anyone think that this is still possibly, if it does come out in September, is Oculus's larger, more AAA type experience for the month? Because as far as I know, there isn't a September title. The next title that we do know about is Brass Tactics next month, but that doesn't come out to the 19th. So I was just curious on everyone's thoughts. I'll kick it back to you, Gary, if you think that Gallery Episode 2 is their monthly kind of high quality title.
It's possible, but I think a lot of these titles have been sort of, I don't know if they've been entirely exclusives or anything like that, but as far as I can remember, they've been most of them have been in that way. And you know, the gallery, it was really a HTC Vive, a SteamVR game originally. The first episode, although the episode 2 is being launched simultaneously for Oculus and SteamVR, so it's possible. I'm not too sure.
Star Trek Bridge Crew was a multi I guess platform, multi ecosystem release that kind of fit that bill for them.
That's a good point. Yeah. So maybe you're right. I didn't really think about that until you mentioned it, because I didn't consider the gallery as sort of an Oculus Rift title, but it's entirely possible because it is going to be a high quality title for sure.
I think I was just going to say, I think they're taking the month of September off when it comes to these big ones. They do another little news blurb that we do have is at the end of September. I believe September 29th, there is a free open beta weekend for From Other Suns, which is the Gunfire Games Oculus game, which I believe is exclusive. And then obviously they do have Brass Tactics on October 19th. So Brass Tactics is their big game for October. From Other Suns, they still don't have a date for that. And they said that this is kind of more for bug testing and stuff. It's kind of a roguelike space adventure, a little bit share some resemblance to faster than FTL, faster than light, and stuff like that. But yeah, I just think they're taking the month of September off. And you know what? They've been banging so many quality games out for so many months that I think that's okay. And we still have like Arctica 1 and stuff coming later this year. So it's a beautiful thing, and we have to be happy with what we've gotten so far.
I think that's, yeah, I couldn't chastise them if they didn't have a polished title released this month, but they made it a point earlier this year to say every calendar month this year we have a polished major title. So I would think that they would feel beholden to sticking to that cadence. So I having not heard what that title is for the month, I thought that was interesting.
Chris, can you think of anything we've missed, or what are your opinions on the gallery anyway?
I think it's definitely good that, you know, episode 2 is finally going to come out at some point. I remember this was like a Kickstarter thing way back in the day, and they were using Razer Hydras, and I was super excited because it was like one of the first games to integrate motion controllers, like at all. Like that was kind of, they were ahead of the curve in that way, because no company really announced motion controllers at that point. I remember they were working with the STEM system for a while, so oh well. But yeah, yeah, I'm excited for it. I never played the first one, but when the second one gets a date, I do want to go back and play the first one so I can get caught up.
Yeah.
Can you imagine though if Oculus said, okay, episode 2 is exclusive, it's coming to the Vive maybe a month later? People would freaking be hella pissed, man.
Yeah, that's not going to happen anyway. But yeah, they would be annoyed. And then I'm so excited about this From Other Suns beta weekend. I have it in my calendar. I'm going to play it like all weekend. It looks like such a fun game. I'm excited. So I just want to throw that out there. Last week I said it was one of my most anticipated VR games. So the fact that there's going to be a beta weekend pretty soon is going to be really awesome. Yeah. Just to finish off,
we know if is that just a straight up public beta, kind of like how Echo Arena and stuff was, like where we'll all definitely, without question, have an opportunity to play it?
Yes.
Sweet.
You know, the Upload VR story on it was saying that they didn't know if Revive people would be able to play it, but they thought for sure Oculus people would be able to play it. And I was like, well, why wouldn't Revive be able to play it? I mean, you're just signing into your Oculus account and you're viewing it from another headset. I don't know how they could block that, but they mentioned that, so I don't know.
Yeah, there might be maybe just covering the bases, because there are a handful of titles that don't work really with Revive, and maybe they're just sort of covering the bases.
Yeah, that, and sometimes it takes him, maybe there's a glitch or something, and it takes him a day or so to get it ironed out and get Revive updated. And if it's a beta weekend, you know, they don't want to make any promises. But my guess is that it will work in some way or the other, barring any unforeseen major glitch.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking earlier about a little bit briefly when we were talking about Google possibly purchasing HTC, that we were talking about one of the main things is the HTC support. And there was a thread on the Vive subreddit this week. Anthony, maybe you can fill us in, but the thread said something along the lines of HTC should die in a boat fire. Why don't you explain yourself?
Yeah, so basically what happened was, this is actually maybe like a week or so ago. I went to play my Vive, and it was, you know, on your little pop-up there where it shows your lighthouses and it shows your wands and stuff. There was a problem with one of my lighthouses, and I was like, I wonder what's wrong with this. And so, you know, I took a look at it, and then I was like, okay, well, maybe I just need to unplug it and plug it back in. And I did that, and it still wasn't working. And basically there was a flashing red light that would just keep flashing red. And then it said something about an error code. And then so I kind of looked it up on Reddit, and it was basically like, what you want to do is you want to unplug your lighthouse, wait a while, and try plugging it back in, try plugging it into a different outlet, you know, some of these types of things. So I waited like one full day, left it unplugged for an entire day, tried plugging it in, tried some different outlets. Everything I did, nothing worked. It would just have that flashing red light. And the error code that I had it's something about some type of internal power failure. And so people that have this, you know, you just have to send it back to HTC basically, or buy a new one or what have you. So the first thing I did was, I mean, I knew I was out of warranty, but I thought, let me go ahead and check with HTC support and just see, you know, ballpark, how much would it cost me to get it fixed, you know, that type of thing. And so I got online with HT support, went through that whole deal. And they basically said that, well, you have to send the Lighthouse out. And typically these repairs are at least $100, possibly more. But the HTC support person also told me that their primary repair center is in Houston, Texas, and that it's closed. It has like extensive water damage from the flooding. And they also told me that they were already having problems with like some repair orders being backlogged and chaos. Like HTC already has crazy chaos in their support centers as it is, and you add a flood on top of that and a closed service center. So if I tried to get this thing repaired through HTC, I mean, it could be February 2018 and I'd be getting a Lighthouse back. So what I decided to do was I just went to the HTC accessories, right? Okay, let me order a Lighthouse. And so it's $134.99. So I'm like, oh man, but you know, go through the whole process. So ultimately what happened was, with tax, shipping, the whole ball of wax, it was like $174.28. And so I'm like, man, that really hurt me. And then I just happened to be on Reddit, and I just decided to post a little thread, and I was like, man, these fools need to die in a boat fire, because these accessory prices are just ludicrous. And then what happened was a bunch of people were replying in the thread. This was early on, way before it like hit the top of the subreddit for a little while there. But a bunch of people were replying and saying, hey, you know what? You can buy it from Amazon for $134.99 as well. And you know, the shipping, if you have Prime, is free and blah, blah, blah. And then people were saying, hey, for that amount of money, go buy yourself a used Vive, because then you'll get a Lighthouse. You'll have another spare Lighthouse. You'll have 2 more backup controllers. You'll have a backup headset. You'll have a backup link box, you know, blah, blah. And so my brain started turning there, and I'm starting to think, damn, as poorly made as all this stuff is, having backups for everything actually is not that bad of an idea. And if I'm up at $175 already, you know, how much more is it to get a used Vive? And I jumped onto Craigslist real quick, and there was a dude locally that was selling a Vive package for $350. And I was like, man, well, if I throw $175 at that, it's not that much more to get to $350. So I hopped onto the computer and I got a hold of Vive support, and I actually canceled my order. So after all that anger, I guess, or frustration, I didn't, you know, I ended up canceling the order. So luckily I was able to cancel it. And so right now I'm still trying to get my hands on, well, I'm trying to get a hold of this guy that has one. Haven't got back to him yet. So maybe he already sold it, and or maybe he's out of town or something. But I've also been looking at eBay for some used Vives. And worst case scenario, Amazon, I believe on September 10th, is going to have more Lighthouses. They don't have them in stock right now, but I'll just buy one at Amazon. But one other thing I wanted to mention is I just bought a sensor, a 4th sensor for my Oculus Rift, because what happens, I'm still having some slight problems with tracking. I don't know if I need new drivers for my Initech card, or maybe my cameras are not angled in precisely the right way, but there will be times where I'm playing a game and I get turned, because I have 2 sensors there, and then I have 1 sensor right there and 2 sensors there. So if I'm facing this direction, everything is fine. If I get turned around in this direction, sometimes it kind of goes sketch, and I'm like, I don't want this anymore. F it. I'm buying another sensor. I'm going all out. I'm putting 4 sensors. I'm going to make a giant ass space. And I'm going to try to, like Steve has said, that as far as he's concerned, there's no difference between having the Oculus and having the Vive. If you have it set up right, he notices 0 difference. And so I want that. I want 0 difference. So I went ahead and bought another sensor. Don't have it yet.
Your space is much bigger than mine, though. I got to caveat that. Like our play space is like, I'm in the top like I forget what it was when the SteamVR statistics came out, but I'm in the top like 5% of play spaces in terms of size. So I do not have a small play space, but you're in the top like 0.5%. Like the people that get up into what are you, like 4.5 meter by 4.5 meter or something like that? Like you're north of 4 in both dimensions, aren't you?
Basically 4x4 pretty much.
Okay,
in terms of the usable space I got.
Yeah, so like I'm 3 by 3.5 ish, and that's wall to wall. So the difference in our spaces are I'm a little bit smaller and so forth. So I will not go on a limb and say you can have flawless tracking like Lighthouse technology with a Rift in that size space. But also what you want to do is make sure like you don't have to be seen by all 4 cameras. That's the point of having, you really only need to be seen by 2 at any given moment. So what I did was I made sure my cameras weren't all overlapping in all ways. I made sure I spread them out enough so that in any spot on my floor, I should be able to be seen by at least 2. Now, of course, in the center, I can be seen by all 3. So well, good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, in my setup, I've got a small room as well. You know, it's 3 meters by 2 meters, and I can pretty much, it is almost identical to the Vive when in terms of tracking. But I will say that I did have to, even in a small play space as I have, I still did need to get a third sensor because, as Steve says, I think you need to be seen by 2 sensors at the same time in order to provide sort of flawless tracking. When I had 2 sensors, I tried it in this experimental 360 where I had one in opposite corners, and it worked okay. But in comparison to my Vive, it didn't really compare in that sense, because there was, as it went from as the motion controllers were detected by one camera and then it went over to the other camera, that's when you noticed a slight dip or a slight change. Whereas if you've got 3 sensors and it's being seen by at least 2 sensors at any one time, then there's no problems at all. The problem I have as well, I've got a small play space, but also my ceilings are quite low over here in my office. So that's the problem as well. You know, I can't put my sensors too high up, and I think that contributes to the problems.
Yeah, I'll just have to see what happens, but you know, it'll be cool for me to experiment with this because I'll have 4 sensors, and so I'll really get to try to experiment with it. So hopefully, more news reports coming.
Yeah, I'll go out on a limb and say I think you'll get perfect tracking with 4 sensors. I've heard people with similar spaces get perfect tracking with 4. I probably need a third. I get that hitch every time I turn around, but I just haven't. Yeah. It hasn't bothered me enough to like buy it yet, but.
No, I mean, when I first got my Oculus Rift, and I mentioned this before, it was sort of a case of I was comparing everything to the Vive and tracking in particular. And this is where I really noticed it. I honestly don't think it would have caused me, if I'd have picked up the Rift first, it wouldn't have caused me any big problems, but it's because I noticed it and I knew it was there. That's why it affected me and why I wanted to get the third sensor. Anyway, we can go on to games we've been playing this week. Chris, why don't you go first on this?
Yeah, sure. So we bought Gorn, or we have Gorn, I guess. So I played a lot of Gorn. I finished the whole game this week. I had some friends visiting from Maine, which is kind of funny because now I'm in Maine, but you know, I was in Vermont, have some friends from Maine come up, and it's just a really good party game, I feel like. It's essentially a gladiator simulator that has like ridiculous physics, and it's very satisfying to like swing your sword, and it has like a jello effect to it. Almost all the weapons do. It's very bloody. It's just overall a fun game to play. I think there was like 6 or 7 bosses. I'm not entirely sure. But this giant new update came out called the Badger Mancer update, which added things like co-op kind of, or like couch co-op, so you can have people with controllers controlling the enemies, and then you can, you know, you're in VR and you guys switch off. So that was like really what sold it for me, is like if I'm gonna have people over, once I get my giant Vive area set up, I can have my TV, 3 people at the TV with controllers controlling enemies. Like it sounds like a really fun thing, and I had a lot of fun with it. We just played it all, you know, switching off all in one night. So I think it's a really good game. The update is very good. You know, they keep adding new weapons to it every, I don't know, month or so whenever they release that. But yeah, just overall it was fun, and I'd recommend it, I think. What do you guys think?
I'm the I'm one of us, one of the four of us that have not played Gorn. So I'm going to interview you if you don't mind.
Perfect.
Because I'm very interested in it. Like I know it's a game that people have praised, and that for whatever reasons, you know, I think we all do this. We don't get around to a game or two, and this is one for me. So you said you beat it. Does it present it to you as a wave battler, or like how do you progress? What do you beat? How did you beat it?
Right. So there's these arena battles. You do maybe 5 or so of them, and it depends. But then you get unlocked like a boss battle, which is just usually one person, or you might have some allies with them or whatever. But it's usually, you know, you do arena battles where there's like a constant wave of people coming in. Like you kill 3 people, 3 more come in, and then you have these boss fights. So they're cool. Each person kind of has like a different move or a different way of battling you.
Is it one of those accidental exercise games?
For sure. I'm ridiculously sweaty playing this game. Like we had to keep cleaning the Rift foam and, you know, using a VR cover. And yeah, I mean, the movement mechanic is hilarious, but it works well. Like you swing your arms and like that's how you move around. So you're just like sprinting like this. And, you know, I just think it's a lot of fun. It was designed to be fun. Like it's not necessarily story driven or anything like that. But if you just like violence and random, like you can rip heads off, and I don't know, it's a little bit like Robo Recall in the sense where you can like rip limbs off, except it's just more bloody.
Yeah, it brings out your inner psychopath out, definitely, because all I wanted to do when I'm playing this, and there's a lot of blood. I mean, it's a cartoony game, but there's a lot of blood with it, and all I want to do is rip these guys' arms off when I'm playing it. I'm not a violent person in real life, but all I want to do when I'm in here, and there's a lot of satisfaction in doing this as well. I think that's the attraction of this game. It's just the amount of satisfaction when you're going through it. I think it's great, and this is one that I had seen, you know, like you, Steve. I'd seen it for sort of being posted on Reddit and various places and people talking about it, but it never really appealed to me. But when I finally went in and gave it a try, yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I can imagine that movement system that you're talking about, Chris, when you've got a few people around and, you know, you're all playing it together, how that could be sort of a hilarious way of playing this game when you're just watching these people. Because here alone in my office when I'm playing it, I feel like a fool when I use that. And I was using the alternate locomotion method where you can just use the thumbsticks, only because I didn't get on too well with that. It's almost like somebody described it as like ski sticks. You know, you sort of drag the world around with as you pull it towards you, you pull the world around you. And I just didn't get on too well with that, but I can imagine how funny it would be if you've got a few friends around.
Yeah, what's cool is like how you can unlock different weapons. Like they have little objectives, so you have to like rip this many people's heads off or whatever. So there's a lot of little mini objectives that have been fun to get. The best one was we got the giant rock. You have to kill like 5 people with a rock. Like they're just random rocks you can pick up and like smash people. Then we got this giant rock, and we could just like, I don't know. That was probably the best thing I unlocked.
Anthony, you've played this as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I have played it. And you know what's interesting about it is, you know how I love Vindicta? You know, I love the motion in Vindicta. So when I first got into Gorn, I just couldn't figure it out, man. I don't know what I'm supposed to press or how, because it wasn't like I would accidentally move a little bit, but then I wouldn't move, and I'm like, I can't figure out what's going on here. So I actually just switched it to standard trackpad. So I've just been using trackpad. Maybe I need to go back and try that more, play around with that. But the thing that I noticed about this game, well, first of all, I've been hearing about this game for months and months and months. As you know, doing VR game rankings, people send me like their top 20 favorite games for the Vive or whatever it is. And I kept seeing Gorn over and over again in people's lists. This was before it was even available. It was like a demo, or it was like some like private beta on Steam, and people were ranking it like they were ranking it in their top 5. Some people had it number 1. It was amazing how high it was ranked. And in the beginning, I thought, you know, what is it? Is this just some like cult of whatever? You know, this is like a cult classic and people are just super into this. But sometimes I wonder with some of these games, it's like, Are people in love with the developer? You know, maybe this is like some YouTube guy or something, because sometimes there's stuff like that going on. I didn't know, like, what is the deal with Gorn? I've seen pictures of it. Never was like, I was like, yeah, it looks kind of like a goofy, bloody thing, but I don't know. So finally getting this game and playing it, I can tell you that there is some nice, what is it? It's the collision detection. The collision detection and the physics are so good. So you have these big, bulky guys that come out with super skinny legs, and they're kind of wobbling around, and they have, like, you know, they have a big mace in one hand and a sword in the other, or whatever they have. And sometimes they have armor all over them, like a armor on their head. And the cool thing is when you get your weapons, you can smack them, and you smack the armor, and you can slowly but surely start smacking their armor off. Like the ones that have armor on their head, I mean, you realize after a while that if you keep smacking them in their head, eventually you knock the head off, and it's just an explosion of blood everywhere. And there's something just funny and enjoyable about it. And then the other thing too is it's so colorful. It's so cartoony and colorful. And it's colorful. I played a lot of games on Vive that have had color, but this game, I don't know, man. Well, I'm playing it on my Rift actually, because my Vive is dead right now. But it's a room scale game too, and that's the other thing. It's an exercise game for sure. You're gonna get exercise. You're gonna get sweaty. I had 2 different fans running. The cool thing about this game being like kind of a room scale thing and being so popular, and like lots of people are getting into it. I heard that the YouTube channel Funhouse or whatever those guys are named, they're like a huge major channel, right? They were playing Gorn. So all of this stuff is great for the VR industry in general, because everybody sees it and they're like, what is this game? You know? And so the room scale idea, the cool thing about that is hopefully more and more people will start trying to make a little bit more space, you know, because they really want to experience Gorn in the right way. One question I have for Chris, though, is I've only been using weapons. So you can just grab people's arms?
Yeah, like if you...
Because I haven't even tried that.
Yeah, I mean, just like Robo Recall, you can like grab people's heads off. Like that's where I've done most of that. I've hit like me and my friends, we've smacked the wall in my apartment like 5 times maybe that night, because like my space is too small for my Rift. I still need to set the giant Vive space in my living room, but like... yeah, it really does make you want a bigger space, because you're swinging so fast you don't even think, and suddenly you're hitting a wall, and like it can be really, you know, it's just like Robo Recall, you know.
You would think we would see more posts with pictures of cracked TVs from Gorn, because that's the type of thing, because you get in there, especially when you have the mace that's twirling around. Have you guys noticed that if you start twirling, that thing goes so damn fast, and you start hearing... I mean, and then if you smack the guy with it perfectly, oh my God, it absolutely devastates them. But you know what? I got the spear, right? The spear is weird, because like you'll stab people with the spear, but then it gets all boingy and it starts bending. And then it's like, I got a guy on the end of my spear, and so I'm smacking him into the other guys. But I feel like I don't use the spear anymore. My favorite right now is I get that one long mace, the firm mace where it has the spiked ball at the end, and then I get the spinning mace in my left hand. And that's my combo. And the other thing, just to go back to the collision detection, because I really think the collision detection in this game is the true star, like the physics and the collision detection. And what it is like the other guy has a mace, right? Or he has a sword or whatever it is. And I use my offhand, like sometimes I'll just deflect his mace, and then it gives me the time to smack him. And sometimes it goes into slow motion mode, and it's visceral. Blood is everywhere, and there's so many guys. And then like after it's over, you know, you're raising your arms up, and it's like, are you not entertained? You know, and they shower you with coins and stuff. I can see why this is on so many people's like super high up on their lists.
I use the spear. I don't know why I'm so good at it. I always like, I have my, you know, my one controller in one hand, and then I like stab this controller like this to make it not wobble as much. And then I like stab people's hearts out, and you get hearts on the stick. It's just nuts. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I do enjoy it. I think it's a good game. Steve, why don't we go over to you next, because you've been playing Sparc, and Anthony mentioned this last week. This is one of the bigger PSVR titles, but you've got a few words to say about it anyway.
Yeah, so when I listened to the show you guys did last week, Anthony wasn't able to play it online, so I wanted to make sure we talked about that because it's one area where this game really shines. Kind of the first thing, my overall tone of Sparc, or the tone of Sparc, not my tone, I didn't make the thing, but the tone of Sparc is it's very Tron-like, and that was discussed. But there's something else more than just the Tron and the color. Like they've nailed a feeling. Like it feels legit. And I think one of the more important things is it doesn't feel like it really suffers too much from the reduced tracking of the PlayStation VR. Like they've made it they've designed the game around that limitation, so you don't constantly feel like you're facing that limitation. Unlike I don't know, well, I never tried Arizona Sunshine on the PlayStation VR, but you know, that's a game that went the other way, so you really feel the limitations of the PlayStation VR. This one, I don't really feel like I'm limited. It is a front-facing game, but they've made it so that it just plays really well that way. So I won't really reinvent the discussion on Sparc. I think everyone has seen it. It's an esport / arena battle game, but when you go online is where I think it really opens up and can have a lot of longevity. It's totally right there in that esports category. I think it's every bit as valid of a game in that space as Echo Arena is, and Rocket League and a lot of those other types of titles. But my biggest the biggest wow factor for me, other than being able to play this with another human person, is that when you go into the lobby, each match is one-on-one, but when you go into a lobby, I've been in a room with as much as, say, 4 people. And if you join a game that's already in progress, you'll view the 2 people that are playing, and they'll be like almost like in an aquarium-sized box that's completely transparent, and you can see little 2-inch versions of them, and they're battling, you know, Sparc, and you hear them talk, you hear all their grunts. It's like listening to a tennis match as they're throwing and deflecting the volleys back and forth. They're like, ugh. And it just sounds, you know, but it sounds so authentic. And then when you get in the match and you're inside that little aquarium size thing, but it feels life size to you, but you can look out and you can see the other people that are spectating, and they're like 50-foot tall giants. And when they talk, you hear them talk even though they're not in the match, and their voices are real booming. And likewise, when you're a spectator and you're watching the little miniature people playing, their voices aren't as booming. It's just a lot of detail just went into that whole feeling of being in a multiplayer room that I thought it was worth talking about, because it's
sorry, Steve, does that put you off when you're in your game though? Does that have it, knowing that these people are around you?
No, it was really fun, and the people that I've played with have been pretty great about it, and we've had fun. There's actually a glitch you can do. So if you walk up to the, I'll keep calling it an aquarium because it's the best word for it, but if you walk up to the aquarium and you stick your hands into it or your head into it, they won't see it. But someone that I was playing with figured out that if he does that and then moves his camera, so it repositions him, then they'll get the giant hands in their way in the middle of the match. So that was a neat little Easter egg type glitch that we had fun with. So it's just a really fun game, and I think it's one of the better multiplayer titles available in VR altogether, not just for the PlayStation VR. And I think it'll be important for CCP. I don't know when they're getting this game out on PC VR, but I think PC VR people are going to like it too, even though it's quote unquote front facing. I think they'll enjoy the gameplay and the overall polish and presentation enough that will be, they won't chastise it for not being quote unquote room scale, because it doesn't feel like it needs it to me.
No,
hey,
that's
Oh,
good point.
go ahead.
Sorry, Anthony. Just quickly on that point of front facing, I feel like there are some games like Hollow Ball, for example. You know, I don't know how this compares to something like that, but Hollow Ball is a front facing game. It's room scale in some ways, but you really don't need it to be anything other than front facing. So I think in certain types of games, they've really got no criticism to put towards it.
Yeah, this fits. Like, I mean, you still move to the side. You have to dodge the balls, and it gets very strategic. Like playing with real people. First of all, I didn't win a match. Like I played, I don't know, 6 or 7 matches, and only across all of those matches, only scored like 2 points. Like I was just getting smoked, which is fine. But it becomes real strategic. Like so you get a ball. Like you'll either be blue or orange. You'll get your ball, and when you're holding your ball, you get a shield sort of on your forearm. And then the other person gets a ball, and when they're holding it, they get a shield. But then if you throw it, your shield goes away. So it's almost like you're just like playing snowball. You know, when it snows outside as a kid, you know, you build up a fort or whatever, and you throw snowballs at each other. Except if you have your shield, you can deflect the snowball, and in some cases you can also punch the ball. And if I throw my ball and the person I'm playing punches it or deflects it, it now becomes his projectile. And then if he follows it up with his ball, I have these 2 things coming at me from different angles, and I have to dodge or micromanage. In a ways, it almost felt like Archangel, where I was constantly micromanaging my arms and what I wanted to do at all times. I either have to dodge it or grab one that's mine and get my shield up, or else, you know, you can get hit real quick and, you know, be down 2 points already by your own ball that's been deflected, and then that person's ball that they've thrown. So it's simple in that you're just throwing balls at each other, but it gets to be really like complex too. It's not an easy game, and it has a learning curve, which is fine because that's what those types of games normally have and what they normally need in order to you know, be sustained for a long period of time.
Steve, my biggest question on the multiplayer is there a way to do private matches, or do you just randomly go into what, like, for example, like, let's say me and you want to play. I finally get PlayStation Plus. Me and you want to play each other. Is there a way for us to do that, or do we have to try to get lucky and end up in the same room?
There is, when you're in a lobby, there's an invite button.
Okay.
So definitely you can get paired up with somebody you know. Whether you can lock the room down, I didn't check. I'd have to imagine you can. I mean, that's sort of a basic online functionality, I think, for most games, but I can't confirm that because I didn't specifically look for it.
The other question is, how do you compare it to, like, I'll call it the Echo Arena problem, you know, where you get in, there's just so many freaking experts. Like, see, that's the reason where I want to have like a private lobby or something like that, where I can play a regular guy that isn't playing it like 5 hours per day and knows how to ricochet it off every side wall and do all the fancy stuff.
I mean, it's got that. And I think a game has to be complex enough that people want to keep playing it for months on end. So yeah, I mean, if you go online like me, you're probably going to get smoked, but you also get better. I mean, that's the part of it too. You know, if you go in and boot up Call of Duty or Battlefield and you haven't played it before, you're gonna be at the bottom of the team. You're not gonna, you know, be getting MVP, and if you are, then you're just God's gift at gaming, I guess. So I don't have a big issue with it. What I have an issue with is if the community becomes small, that it's only experts, and then it's difficult for new players to get in, which, you know, actually brings me to another point while we're talking about PlayStation. Is this month PlayStation Plus is giving away rigs for free, which I haven't played in a long time, and I know I talked about it a lot last year. Is one of my favorite games, and it is still a very polished, high quality game. Also kind of in this esports space, and I don't know what that community is like anymore, but I'm hoping that it doesn't suffer from that problem, so that anyone going in and getting it with PlayStation Plus is able to get over that learning curve and become a thriving community. So hopefully the same thing happens for Sparc, and it's got the advantage of being, well, what I don't know if CCP's announced it, but I'm assuming based on Eve Valkyrie, their history there, that it will be, once it's released on Oculus and Steam, that it'll be cross-platform multiplayer.
That would be cool. Did you get a chance to try any of the challenge modes where you're just kind of going up a leaderboard and see, like you're just practicing?
Yeah, I did a couple of them. I did pretty poorly at it, I believe, but I certainly wasn't. I don't remember where I placed. But I quickly, after I played those two, wanted to check out the online.
Cool.
Okay. Anthony, why don't you go next? Because you can talk about Thumper, which I've played briefly as well.
Yeah, so Thumper, actually, no, why don't I'll let you talk about Thumper, and then I'll just have a few interjections to it. But what I can mention, I tried a couple other small little things. These are like free little demos, and I'll just mention them real quickly. So MSI Electric City, you guys might remember way back, there was a experience that MSI came out with where you basically are sitting in a chair, and I mean, you could stand up, I guess, but it's kind of like it's on rails and you're going through like a futuristic city, and it's just a cool little free experience. You know, there's nothing major about it, but when you're in there, you know, it looks really cool, and you're like, oh, this is a cool little thing that MSI has come out with, and they're doing it, of course, to promote their video cards. They know that the VR gaming market, I mean, who's upgrading video cards more than VR gamers? We're really into that thing. So it makes sense for them to do that. Well, they just came out with a new experience. I believe it's called MSI Electric City Core Assault.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah. So the game, this little demo thing that you play, it's very similar to Zortex in the lab. And you grab a ship just like in Zortex, and you're holding your ship, you're moving it around, and you're shooting at these other little ships. Now, the entire world that you're playing this little game on is like a MSI motherboard. And so you're like on this giant MSI motherboard, and at the very end of the experience, like this big MSI graphics card comes in and locks into the, like I didn't notice it until the very end. I'm like, oh, this is a freaking motherboard. No wonder. I'm looking at, you're like protecting like the memory of the motherboard and stuff, and the ships are attacking you. It's nothing spectacular. But if you got, you know, a spare 15 minutes, it's not a bad little thing to screw around with. So I recommend it as a free little screw around, basically. And then another little free experience to try is there's this thing called Project M Dream. And this is like some type of demo for an upcoming Korean dating simulator, I guess it would be. And the only reason I thought this was cool is because it had like a realistic human character in VR. And I'm always curious about, you know, the uncanny valley and all that. You know, I kind of want to see, where are we going with this? Like, how advanced are we getting? And so I thought I would try this out. And now this little demo only takes 5 minutes. I mean, it is over in the blink of an eye. And so when it first starts out, you see like the Unreal logo, and it's like right here in front of you, and then it fades into smoke, and the smoke goes into your face. Kind of a cool little effect that it starts out with. And then you're just seeing like clouds and stuff. And then you see this lady standing there, and she has her back turned to you, and you start getting closer and closer to her. And then she like turns around, and she's looking at you, and she's smiling at you. And then like a tear goes down her cheek. And it's cool just to see, you know, a human character up close, impersonal, and like they're throwing every polygon they can, you know, at this lady. And it's just one lady there. There's nothing else that's going on. So I'm not sure how it's going to work in a real game where they have walls and furniture and possibly other people in the same room, because supposedly this is just an example of one character that's in their game. But it's just an uncanny valley type of thing. When I was in there and I saw this lady, her dimensions seemed a little bit off to me. Like her face was too big. This is something that we're going to have to solve in VR. And I don't know if it's a situation where her scale is the right scale that it should be, but maybe because I'm not seeing my arms, I'm not seeing my chest, so I'm not physically there. So my dimensions are not exactly the way that they really are. So that when I'm seeing this other person, she seems like oversized almost. Like if you were to take a regular person and you were to increase their size by 20% or something, you know, and so it was a little weird from that standpoint, but I think it's, you know, it's a 5-minute thing. It's worth checking out just to see where we are in this uncanny valley type of deal.
Okay, cool. Well, I can talk about Thumper. This is an older title, you know, everybody's probably already heard about this, but this was one that came out on the PSVR originally, or was it released on PC VR at the same time?
It came out on PlayStation. It was one of their launch titles.
Okay, yeah. So I played a little bit of this yesterday. And you know, it's a good game. It's a good rhythm game. The problem I have is that this really isn't the kind of reason I play VR, and that's sort of my takeaway from this. I think when I'm in there and I was playing this game, I was enjoying it, and I wanted to get to the next section because it's quite a spectacle. You know, you're going across along this track, and there's a lot of things. There's a lot of effects happening to you while you're going along there, and I enjoyed that aspect of it, but at its core, it's a rhythm game, and I've never really been one for these kinds of games, if I'm being honest. And like I say, it's not really the reason why I play VR. I've played things like Audio Shield and Soundboxing, and I can enjoy them for what they are, but I generally want to play VR where I'm immersed within an experience, within a world or a narrative or something. And I did enjoy my time in Thumper, but it's not something that I think I'll stick with. You know, rhythm games, it's going to appeal to somebody who likes rhythm games. Because I'm not into that, then I can't really enjoy this as much as the next person. Anthony, you know, you played this as well. I don't know, do you enjoy rhythm games on the whole?
I'm not really a rhythm game guy, but when this came out on PSVR, they had a demo for it. And I played the demo, and I really liked the demo, but I didn't end up buying the game right away. I was like waiting for a sale or something. I know Steve ended up buying it, and I always thought, yeah, I'll get Thumper, but you know, I'll get it in the future. And then so seeing this sale on Oculus, it was what, $10. So went ahead and grabbed it. I tried it on the Rift. And the one thing that jumped out to me about it is that this is the first time I noticed that my headphones, like, you know, the built-in headphones of the Rift, don't have the audio quality that my Sennheisers have. And because when I played this the first time on PSVR, always use my Sennheisers, and there's more bass, there's more mid-range, the highs are higher. Honestly, the Oculus built-in headset is great. You know, 95% of the time it's good enough that I don't even care. But this time I did, because I have that comparison, because when I was in Thumper on PSVR, I mean, the bass is pounding, and that's a big part of it. You're like slamming into these walls and stuff. It has a very physical, visceral kind of feel to it. And that was kind of lost on me. The other thing I noticed too is visually, I was expecting the visuals to be like really better than PSVR, but there really wasn't much of a difference. In fact, I think I even noticed more screen door, and it might be because the Oculus has better clarity. And it's a little crisper, and I think I noticed some more screen door. Also, PSVR uses subpixels, which helps it with that. But this isn't one of those games where it was on PSVR. Now you buy it on PCVR, and the graphics have a major boost. It's pretty much the same exact game. So I played it for a while, but I don't know that I'm going to go back to it, honestly, because kind of like you, Gary, it's like, maybe it was because when I played it that very first time, it was so new. You know, PSVR had just came out, and I was so into all these new experiences. Maybe I had a little bit more excitement. It's still a great game. There's nothing wrong with it. And for $10, it's a hell of a value.
Yeah.
But yeah, I for some reason, I wasn't quite as blown away as I was when I tried the demo.
Well, I agree. I think it is a great game, but it's just not my kind of game, and it's not the reason I play VR. That's really all I've got to say against it, because, you know, I'm playing this and it's polished, it's great. You know, there's nothing wrong with it at all if you like this kind of game. And if these kinds of experience, very enclosed, very narrow in scope kind of experiences are what appeal to you in VR, then I think, you know, I can't knock it. I think it's great, but it doesn't appeal to me.
I'm curious because I really like Thumper, and when you say, Gary, that that's not why you play VR. I get that you're not into the game itself, because I'm assuming you wouldn't play it on a monitor either.
No.
But what is it specifically about VR, this game and VR, that made you say that's not why I play VR?
Yeah, the reason is, before I'd even tried VR, and for years and years I've been thinking about how much I'd love to get into VR. Even going back to the 90s when I first tried it back in the original wave. These old virtuality machines. The reason I want to use VR is because I want to be immersed within a world. Okay, I want to feel like this place where this VR experience is positioning me into is a real living, breathing world. And the closer I get to experiences that give me that, that's really what I want. What I don't like, and it's not necessarily that I don't like it, I don't dislike Thumper. It's very narrow in scope. Okay, it's doing one particular thing, it's one particular type of game, and it's doing that very well. But I don't know how long I'd sit there with a headset on playing this game. Whereas if I'm playing a game which is, say, something like The Gallery, for example, it's still relatively narrow in scope, but it's more of, it's placing you within a world, it's placing you within a narrative experience, and this is just something that really appeals to me.
Is it the physical embodiment?
I know what it is. What it is in Thumper. See, the thing is, Thumper is good in VR, but it's not designed around VR. And so you're hovering over this beetle, and the beetle is there, but you're not really that close to it. Things aren't really happening right around you. You're kind of above it, and you're kind of going through it. The good thing about Thumper being in VR is it closes you off to everything else, and it becomes this like isolation chamber where you can really get into it and get kind of absorbed into it. But from a pure 3D, like things happening all around you standpoint, it's actually really light on that, and it doesn't have a ton of 3D in your face stuff.
There's one thing that people will say about VR, where they'll say, can this game be played on a monitor and will it be just as good? And some people will say, well, yes, a game could be played on a monitor and it will be just as good. I don't agree with that entirely. I don't think that just because a game can be played and be just as enjoyable on a monitor, that it shouldn't necessarily be experienced in VR. I think VR can bring certain things to certain types of games. For example, like I don't know, something like, say, Uncharted, a third-person kind of game. I still think you could get something extra out of that game within VR. However, just going back to my original point about placing me within a world, that's really what I'm looking for in VR. That's not to say that I wouldn't love to play an Uncharted type of game within VR. I think it'd work great. But I don't feel like that's the reason I first got into it and why I'm really enthusiastic about VR.
No, it goes back, and I know we talked about this a long time ago. I forgot which game we were talking about. Maybe it was Smashbox Arena. I think it was just me and you on that episode, Gary, and we talked about the embodiment. Like you said, you felt like you were a god or something. I'm like, no, it's just your camera perspective. You're not embodied anything. You're just the camera. And so I always think that that's a fascinating subject, and it applies perfectly to Thumper because there is no embodiment. You don't have hands. You aren't there. You're just in a like Anthony said, an isolation chamber of the visual and the audio feedback. And I think it's excellent at that. I love that feeling. It's like I was able to do some drugs and go someplace else, even though it's not my body. It's like almost you can think of it in a spiritual way. Like if the consciousness was to become bodiless, and just be this ethos thing, spirit or whatever. Like what would it be like on an acid trip if you didn't have a body? Well, maybe Thumper's it. Like
that's a good point. If I thought about it in a slightly different way, I don't know. I still feel like parts of certain VR games are just so narrow in scope that I feel like it's about points. Thumper, it's a game about points, and I want to sort of get away from that in VR. I want to get onto the not necessarily the next level, but something a little bit different from that. That's all, really. But
one last thing I'll say about Thumper before we leave this topic is that I think sound is such a huge part of Thumper. It is so huge. And honestly, if I were to go back and play Thumper again on the Rift, what I would want to do, and this is something I used to do way back in the days, is I had my setup. You could probably see that these big tower speakers over here, right? And subwoofer and stuff. And I had my setup in such a way where that was the front of my play space. And so for certain games like Space Pirate Trainer and stuff, if you're basically just facing one direction, I would actually use these big ass powerful speakers and the rumble, you know, the boom, boom, boom. And when I was playing PSVR, I played Thumper on PSVR in this room, and I sat facing that direction, and I had my speakers bumping. I had that bass pumping, and the game is so much more visceral and so much more powerful when that is going on compared to the headset in the Rift. As good as it may be, it can't do those kinds of sounds quite like that, and it's such a big part of that game that I need to. One thing I don't know, I've never even tried it with the Oculus, is like mirroring the sound. I'm sure you could do it. It's probably not that hard. I need to screw around with that.
Yeah, I play everything with a subwoofer. Unless people are in the house or sleeping or whatever, I play everything with a subwoofer for that effect. But I've also always been sort of a theater audio nerd, and I have a subwoofer. Like it's a must in most situations. I'll talk about the next game kind of in that same theme because it's not a first-person perspective game, and that's The Lost Bear on PlayStation VR. It's a $12 title, and I bought it. I know we get a lot of crap for free, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to buy something. So I bought Lost Bear, and it's a diorama type game. Like the game I would compare it to the most in VR is Witchblood, that's on the Oculus Rift. But the Lost Bear does that aspect better. It's not really a picture frame diorama. It's a theater stage, and it's a 2D back and forth platformer. But what it does differently is that it sets you're in the seat, and you're in this. You see this stage, and there's the curtains draw back and forth after you die or go into a new level, but then they populate everything else around you. So you're still in this 3D environment. It's just that the gameplay is taking place on this theater screen, and it's not a video theater screen. It's a like where you would see a play. And so you play the game, and it's a fine platformer. It's got a cutesy little story, very cartoony sprite graphics, so it looks neat in that way. But one of the things that I thought was really cool is in certain things, like fog will start rolling out from the stage, and like the fog effect is still very much VR and 3D, and it'll pull in closer to you. Or bugs like bees and flies, they'll come out from the world and they'll fly like all the way up to you. So you get they did a really good job of blending 2D basic, traditional gaming with the benefits of VR and taking up space and having some 3D effect. So it's a short game. Again, it's only $12, so there's not a lot to say. It's not going to reinvent the industry, but it's a high quality game. It does something a little different if you're the type of person that doesn't mind to hold a controller and sit down and play a VR game. This is an interesting way to do it.
Okay, sounds pretty good. Okay, has anybody else got anything they want to mention before we get onto this giveaway?
I'll just say one thing real quick. VR game rankings, I haven't really brought that up recently, but if anybody out there, you have a PlayStation VR, you have a Vive, you have an Oculus Rift, if you have an opportunity to sit down for a minute and think about what is your top 5 or top 10, or if you got the time, top 20 favorite VR games for whatever platform that is, we really could use your submissions on vrgamerankings.com. It helps us create the ranking lists that other people use to help them buy games and know what's good. So I just wanted to do a little quick shout out for that, and hopefully some people can maybe check that out and submit a top 10, a top 5, anything. It helps us out a lot.
Yep, pretty cool. Okay. So anyway, this has been episode 52, which means that we've been going for approximately a year now on VR Roundtable. So we wanted to do something just to, you know, commemorate this event. You know, we've just had a normal show. We don't want to do anything outlandish, but we've got a few codes for some games. Now, what we're going to do with this, we have codes for Raw Data, Blasters of the Universe, Predator, Vendetta Rising, and Just in Time Incorporated. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to split these out. Now, if anybody could leave a review on iTunes, then what we're going to do is, if you leave a review on iTunes in the next sort of week or 2 weeks, we've not fully decided this yet, but we'll work it out. And we'll post more details in the comments under this video. But if you do that, then you'll be placed into a draw and you'll get a couple of these codes. And also what we're going to do as well, you know, just to not leave YouTube out of this, we're going to add, so if you leave a comment in this video, you'll also be placed into a draw and get another couple of these codes. Can anybody explain this a little bit clearer than me? Because I've ruined it, haven't I?
Yeah, no. So what we're going to do here is, basically, you guys are going to have to bear with us a little bit on this giveaway, because it's going to be, we're going to give this stuff away. So don't worry about that. All you have to do really is, if you listen to the show on iTunes, you go leave us a review on iTunes, you will have a chance, you will be placed in the running. We're not getting swarmed by reviews, so you might get a really good chance to win something here. And but what we'll do is, everybody that leaves a review on iTunes, we're going to take all of those names and we're going to draw a person out of that. And then so on our next episode, well, we'll give it 2 weeks. So we'll do it on episode, is it 53 then? So it'd be
54,
episode
54, yeah.
54. Okay, so on episode 54, we're going to announce that blah, blah, blah on iTunes won some games. So if you're blah, 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 send us an email and you know, we'll verify that, and then we'll get you your games. And then for the YouTube comments, it's the same type of thing. Everybody that replies, or I mean, leaves a comment in the YouTube video, we're going to do a random drawing as well. And we'll announce it again on episode 54. And then, you know, you can send us an email, VR Game Rankings at VR Roundtable at gmail.com. Send us an email. And so we'll work it out. We'll figure it out. It might take a little while, but we're giving stuff away.
Yeah, basically, leave a review, leave a comment, and you're in with a chance of winning something.
We'll figure the rest out. Yeah.
Yeah. We're new to this, so you're going to have to bear with us a little bit. Anyway, we can call it there then. So that was episode 52, VR Roundtable. Thanks for joining us this week. And like we say, you know, leave a comment, leave a review, and also subscribe to the channel. Very much appreciated. So yeah, we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
Bye.